welcome back to the Coach's Call. I'm your host, Guido Prino. Thank you for joining me. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. Stay with us. Um, Waited a little bit. I wanted the first round of the NHL to come to some conclusion because I wanted to cover off a few topics in one show, and now that's happened. So I'm going to cover off the the Montreal Tampa Bay series. I also wanted to talk about the Ottawa Senators and the Tkachuk situation, get a little bit into Edmonton, and then maybe close things off with what's going on in Toronto, of course, with the Chayka situation. So let me start with the Montreal Canadiens and Tampa Bay Lightning. So 7 games, amazingly close two teams. Really good series as far as the hockey goes. There's a few things I didn't like about the series. And if you've watched me before, you know I typically harp on the referees. And this was no different. And I didn't do it in between games because I kind of wanted to see how the whole series would go. And I think that it ended up something with Tampa Bay having 25 or 26 power plays to Montreal's 23. So, when you look at it on a whole, you go, well, it was evenly called. But if you watched, I think, some of the games, sometimes the timing of the calls is really what matters, right? Um, there was a bunch of missed calls, or there was a bunch of fake calls, and in gameplay, it determines momentum, and it determines sometimes the game. And I just thought the first couple of games, there was just the refs were overly involved, and I think they were easily influenced at times from John Cooper. I love John Cooper, one of my favorite coaches, but he was doing the right thing. But I thought he over influenced the referees, and I don't know. It was maybe I knew it and I just didn't pay much attention to it, but it was one of the first times that I heard about a supervisor, a game supervisor, and then the coaches and others are being able to have these conversations with the game supervisors. And part of me is like, why do we need a game supervisor, right? I mean, we now have two refs. Like, what happens when you go to the game supervisor? Hey, I don't really like the way things are going, and maybe that's a good thing, but why are things not going that particular way? So I just felt like there were games where the referees were a little too involved, and may have influenced sometimes the outcome of the game. And don't get me wrong, I think they missed calls on both teams at times. And then there was a period of time where I didn't know what a penalty was anymore. I didn't know what holding or interference or charging was anymore. And it's just, I think I've always asked for, give me consistency. And arguably I had consistency. I guess it was bad consistency, but still I just felt like there was something missing referee wise. The other thing was, and I'm not a big fan of this in any sport, whether it's for my team or that I cheer for, or a team that is versing the team that I cheer for, and that's the poor sportsman shenanigans, right? Like I look at a guy like Kucherov, and going out of his way to talk up the goalie. Yeah, you know what? In passing, I think it's part of the game, but I think to purposely skate down the rink and kind of do that, and what he did. And I thought, I think Ron McLean might have addressed it, and he said, it should have been a penalty. It should have been an unsportsmanlike penalty. I think that doesn't belong in the game. Chirping in the scrum, it's cool. You go for it. It's awesome. Part of the game. But I just thought, out of the way stuff, not cool. The other one was Brandon Hagel. I think early in the series, like he did the little "hey shorty" thing, and he just the over animation sometimes. I think he was trying to follow suit like with what the Washington Capitals did last year. Tom Wilson, like with the boohoo and the crying. It's just they didn't have the mojo to do it. Although Hagel had a really good series goals wise, and sort of carried the Lightning for a few times, and had that sort of game 7 goalie stopping save against Slavkovsky there. Um, he just didn't have the right mojo for me, and those shenanigans, I don't think they belong as part of the game. Again, I think they're more unsportsmanlike than they are anything else. But then, diverting my attention more to the Montreal Canadiens and what some of the differences were, I thought the line matching, or the lines that Marty switched up, were fun to watch and really good, and he responded really well. Really impressed me, actually. I think when Marty first went to the Habs, I held reservation. I thought, is he the right guy? Is this the right thing that's happening? And part of me was thinking, yeah, because the type of player he was. But part of me was like, inexperienced, right? But you really saw the competitiveness come out, um, and some of the intuition that he had, putting players in and out of the lineup at the right time. Watching Arbor Jacki in the series, he was in there at the right time. I thought the first couple of games he set the tone, and he played really well. He was reserved. He did the right thing in the right situation. And you saw, if you watch the scrums, you saw Tampa Bay Lightning did not want to get involved with this guy, right? There was a bunch of times he didn't have a partner to dance with. Like, they were just avoiding him. And that's part of setting the stage on the ice and the game, and setting the tone. And players play different when you have someone like that in the lineup, in that scenario. So it'll be interesting to see. Buffalo, now they're going to the second round. It'll be interesting to see what happens there with the lineup. I think Buffalo's a bit of a different team. They can certainly play rough, but I don't know if that's their game. So it'll be interesting to see when and if Jacki comes in and out of the lineup. And I think if he does come in, you're going to see like a guy like Struble maybe come out. But Dobson, again, big difference maker in that game 7 as well. Good to see him back. Arguably, you say, well, it still was a 1-goal game, and it was still a tight game, and Montreal had, one of the worst shot on net performance in the history of the franchise, maybe the NHL, with only the 9 shots, but the result was still they won. So did changing those couple of players make a big difference on the score sheet? No, but it probably was the right situation for that game. Okay. And then I guess one of the last things is in net, Jakub Dobeš. Wow, lights out. Knock on wood. If you're a Habs fan, you want to see that continue and keep going. Listen, if he does this the rest of this playoffs and they go on to win, fantastic, great for the Montreal Canadiens, and what seems to be Canada's team now, is they're the only Canadian team left in the playoffs this year. But I certainly hope this is more of a Patrick Waugh, Carey Price longevity career story than it is like a Steve Penny thing, right? But we'll see what happens in the next few series. But lights out performances by Jakub Dobeš, and good to see a Canadian team sticking around in the second round, and let's see what they do, right? Now, switching gears to the Ottawa Senators. So, of course, Ottawa, swept out by the Carolina Hurricanes. Here's the thing with the Ottawa Senators, and I'm not going to talk too much about the series. I didn't think they were going to beat the Carolina. I just think there's some underlying things going on in Ottawa. I've never been a big fan of Travis Green. I think I said that when they hired Travis a few years ago. Just not a fan of how he runs the team or the system. But I think the elephant in the room here is Tkachuk. And your captain, he went without any points. Not a real big difference maker. Started the first game, with the opening 3-second, game 1 fight. I've seen this show from Tkachuk now a few times in different forums. He did it in international hockey as well. And I just think that he misses the boat. And what happened with him at the Olympics and then coming back to Ottawa, I was at one of the games after the Olympics, and there's just this uneasiness among the fans, right? Like, it's like they want to cheer for him because it's, they're Sens fans and they want their team to win. But they don't feel right cheering about him either because of his behaviors and antics around the Olympics, and there's just this dark cloud surrounding Tkachuk, and I don't know if that's the culture that you want for your team. I mean, look, the Ottawa Senators are an interesting organization overall, and culture runs deep there, and maybe not good culture. I've had different experiences that I can talk about later, but it just demonstrates, and I when I see the way Kachuk behaves, and I just look at some of the roots of that organization. I think they need to change that up. I think you're going to see him traded at some point. They should trade him at some point. Do they are they going to be well enough to get good value for him? That'll be an interesting thing. But I think for Ottawa to move on, they have to move on from Kachuk, and then refocus the organization, change the culture. That is how you're going to get more people in your building that are your fans. And there's a culture issue in Ottawa with Kachuk. So I'll leave that there. I won't go too much into it. I might do a little show a little deeper on that Ottawa situation a little bit later. The other Canadian team, the Edmonton Oilers. Wow. This organization has blown its window. They've missed the boat completely on getting a goalie, shoring up their goalie situation. They've tried to piecemeal that goalie situation. They've missed the mark a number of times. Um, you know, Inevitably, like they've wasted some serious talent in McDavid and Drysdale just by not surrounding them with the right folks. And what I haven't figured out there yet, and I know I'm putting a lot of pressure just on the goalie situation. There was a period too as well, and even now, like defense has not been looked after properly either. But here's what I can't figure out yet. Yes, you need those positions improved, but I haven't figured out if the coach has got the right system for that, the talent that they have. Like, are they trying to force a certain type of system on a team that doesn't have the skill set or the personnel, the players to play that system? So yes, positions matter, but I'm not sure about the system. Although they've gone through some coaching changes, but I don't know what's going to happen there, right? If you're thinking at it, it almost feels a little bit like the Toronto Maple Leafs, and how for a couple of years they thought, well, we got the right players, let's just go back to let's just use them. This is our core, is what we're going to do. And I just feel like the Oilers have entered that space now. This is our core. We're not going to get any better. This is what we're going to do. And then we kind of all saw how the Toronto Maple Leafs just fell off the cliff there, and we're going to talk about them in a moment here, but. I have that vibe going on in Edmonton, and that vibe's feeding other rumors or other hopes and dreams of teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs when it comes to McDavid and things like that. But something different's got to happen in Edmonton, to figure out if they're going to take another stab at this. What do you do for the goalies, and what do you do to shore up the defense? But you might have to make some bold moves there. Last topic, leave it to the Toronto Maple Leafs to try and be part of the news. During two great game sevens in the NHL, or you got a great game seven in the NHL between the Habs and the Lightning. You got the Raptors playing their game seven, and along comes the spider, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs feel like they got to make a splash and stay in the news and be in the news. And not necessarily with like things that is going to excite the Toronto Maple Leaf fan base. So they've made an announcement that they're going to bring in John Chayka and Matt Sundin, one as the general manager and one as president of hockey operations, fan experience, player development. Here's what I think. So they bring in this fella named John Chayka, who was a young GM with the Arizona Coyotes, left the organization amidst some controversy. It's there's bits and pieces of it. So part of the story was, I think he left. He pursued some employment without having talked to the organization. It may have had something to do with a betting organization, which would have created some kind of conflict of interest. He was seen as a data analytics guy, but there was all this controversy, and he left, and he hasn't been in the circles for 6 years, roughly, right? Now, while he was there, he did make some questionable moves. I mean, I think there was a Taylor Hall trade that was seen as a rental, and he gave up picks and prospects for that. There was some positive things, like I know Darcy Kemper was one of the things that happened in the Schmaltz-Strome deal, which had some a semblance of a good move. But I think he overestimated where that organization was and sort of wasted the window of a couple of these moves and a couple of these players. And so I didn't see his body of work as, oh, wow, this is somebody who I would want to go pursue after 6 years of not being in the NHL since the suspension departure happened. So there's a lot of rumors out there. And I think that, I was watching one of the other sports shows, and I think Frankie Corrado on TSN might have said, the Toronto Maple Leafs go and get somebody off the scrap heap to bring in. And I just thought it was interesting that he would say that, but then there were other analysts going, what are they doing bringing this guy in? Why are they bringing this guy in? I don't know that I've collectively seen, analysts ask that same question and scratch their head and go, what are they doing bringing this guy in? Now, a Leaf fan who I respect very much and is a friend of mine, he said, well, I'm just, I just want to give him a chance. I just want to see what he can do. Maybe he, I don't want to be negative here. I just want to give him a chance. And, I feel bad. I feel sorry for some of the Leaf fans that think that way, because I think things have gone bad for so long. They're just willing to accept anything at this point. Let's just give it a chance. Let's just give it a chance. Maybe this will be it, right? At least, he said, at least they didn't recycle, all the old guys that come and go all the time. Well, they didn't, but they did. I mean, they're recycling somebody that was in the NHL, left amidst, bad things happening, and didn't have a really good track record. So yes, they're recycling somebody. Maybe just not recycle, but still recycled. And I just don't think he's the right guy, unless they're looking at it going, we're going to go through a period of some really bad times here. Let's just get somebody, and it doesn't matter who it is, comes on the cheap and roll the dice and whatnot. Now, Matt Sundin, why do you bring Sundin in? I think Sundin maybe will help quell the noise on this other guy. It's still confusing as to what Matt Sundin's role is going to be. I think Matt Sundin's role is going to be PR. Like, you have a face in front of the franchise that everybody loved and respected. Maybe they forget about Chayka and whatever's going to happen there, and maybe Sundin becomes the buffer of the organization. I just don't see how bringing in this guy benefits the Toronto Maple Leafs. You've got all the media kind of going wild. Toronto has a fundamental problem, and I've said it all along. They've had the talent on the ice at times. There's this media fan base that puts way too much pressure on this organization, but you can't change the fan base. You could change the players, and they've tried to do that. You could change the coaches and the GMs, and they've tried to do that. But it's higher than that, right? It's the Pellies and all of that stuff that happens at that next level. I think as long as that exists, I don't know that you're ever going to have the right winning culture in Toronto. So, a longer coach's call today. Thank you for joining me. Go Montreal, go. Canada's team moving forward in the second round. Let's hope for the best for them. Everything else we'll cover off a little bit more as time unfolds here. Let's enjoy our spring sports. Go Habs, go. Thank you for joining me on the Coach's Call. If you don't subscribe. Take care.